Welcome to the Music Nut Program. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining me today. The community has spoken with 42% of the votes. 1980 wins the next show I do a top 10 albums on, which I will do in the next minutes. 1970, 32% of the vote. That show will be out next week. I already have my selections for that year. I'm going to have a lot of honorables for 1980 at the end of this video. Let's get started. Motorhead, Ace of Spades is my number 10. This is one of the classic Motorhead albums from the classic lineup of Lemmy, Filthy Phil Taylor, and Fast Eddie Clarke. Kick-ass album. Those of you who are more casual, they're not just a title song. They've made a lot of great albums right around this time. Love Me Like a Reptile is my favorite song by Motorhead. Shoot You in the Back is fantastic. Fire, Fire, awesome. Jailbait is killer. All these tracks are pretty heavy and fast. Some of them are a little slower, like Chase is Better Than the Catch, which is excellent. We Are the Road Crew, fantastic. This album kills from top to bottom. Probably my favorite Motorhead, although Overkill and Another Perfect Day would be close. That's my number 10. Ace of Spades. Number 9. Now, this band these days is considered more of an influential band. They were never really big. They got played a little bit on MTV in the mid 80s, only because I saw some of their videos on MTV when we first got MTV in our house in 1984. And I'm talking about Killing Joke and their self-titled debut. Now, the most famous song on here that a lot of people like hard rock and heavy metal would know would be The Weight, because The Weight was covered by Metallica on their 1987 release, Garage Days, the 598 EP or the 998 CD, which that along with Back for the Attack were the first two CDs I bought. But this is fantastic. No More is an influential band because they were the precursor to industrial music. KMFDM winning up best in industrial music. And this whole album is killer. It's very organic compared to the industrial music that would follow, but War Dance is fantastic. Tomorrow's World is very atmospheric. They got synthesizer on here, but it's carried by that rhythm section, these songs. Bloodsport's a fantastic instrumental. The Weight, of course, was covered by Metallica. I think Killing Joke did a better version. The original is usually better than the cover, although Metallica's version was good. This one, even though it has synthesizer on, it's more eerie and it's actually heavier than Metallica's version. Complications is awesome. Primitive is awesome. This whole album kills. It's my number 9 self-titled debut by Killing Joke, and they would release another album self-titled in 2003. Number 8. This is an album that my brother Robert introduced me to into the 1990s. Now, I knew this band. I knew Special Beat Service because Save It for Later got played on the radio back in the day. But Robert introduced me to the ska side of the English beat. And this is their debut. I Just Can't Stop It. Now, in my opinion, I'm not a huge ska guy. My brother is. But this is one of the best ska albums ever released. This is a knockout from back to front. Mirror in a Bathroom with that slinky bass line on is excellent. The horn lines on here by Saxa are awesome. Hands Off She's Mine is excellent. Their cover of Smokey Robinson, The Miracles, Tears of a Clown is excellent. Ranking Full Stop is awesome. Can't Get Used to Losing You is another cover that works out very well. Best Friend is fantastic, very catchy. Two Swords, Twist and Crawl. Everything on this album is wonderful. This is the original CD, and it came out with a remastered edition earlier this year with some bonus tracks on it. We have some live songs on it as well. But that's my number 8. The English Beat, I Just Can't Stop It. Number 7. This is an album that's very divisive among this band's fans. A lot of people call this a mess because what the Clash did on this album was they took that eclectic sound that they had on London Calling, and they took it to another level on Sandinista. Now, this was originally released as a 3-record set, 2 CD set when they put it out on CD, and they cover nearly every genre on here. But the songs have to be there. And I think the songs on here are fantastic. Magnificent Seven was one of the first rap songs in it. Rap songs that we would have, I should say. We got The Leaders, more rockabilly. You got The Sound of Sinners. They're going into gospel territory. You got a lot of songs that are reggae and dub on here, like The Crooked Beat, One More Time, One More Dub. There's nothing punk on this album, really. They started out as a punk band, and like the closest thing to a punk song on this would be Police on My Back. And to me, that's just a great rock song. But so many great tracks on here. Some of these are like you can't really categorize them. Like Lose This Skin, I don't even know how you would categorize that song. The third record is a little hit and miss because while there's great songs on it, like Version City and The Street Parade, there's also some dub versions of other tracks on the album, and the version of Career Opportunities, which was on the first album with the kids singing, and that's kind of a throwaway. But if you got 1 or 2 throwaways on a 36-song album, I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, the songs on here are fantastic, and it works very well as a piece, in my opinion. And this is the album I go back to with The Clash more often than all the others, although I love everything they did, except Cut the Crap. But my number 7 is Sandinista by The Clash. Number 6. Now, this band I got into in the mid-'80s, and I had this on cassette back in the day, and now I have a CD version of the first several albums from the Career label. It's Saxon, and the album I'm going with is Wheels of Steel. They also released Strong Arm of the Law in 1980. And I'll just pull out the insert here just to show you the original album cover. It would be right here. This is the original album cover to Wheels of Steel from 1980. I picked this over Strong Arm of the Law because I think the highs are higher on this album. Machine Gun is a fantastic, wicked opener. 747 Strangers in the Night was a hit single in the UK and is my favorite song by Saxon. Stand Up and Be Counted is wonderful. The title track is awesome. Freeway Mad is heavy. They were pre-thrash in some of these songs. They played really fast before we had a name for thrash metal. Machine Gun, speaking of a fast song, is another great track. See the Light Shining is wonderful. Everything on here is awesome. Susie Hold On is my least favorite because I think in 83 on Power and the Glory, they tightened the song up and made it better. But this album is a classic. It is Wheels of Steel. Let me get out that insert again. Right here. And there's the cover for the 747 Strangers in the Night single. This collection, I don't know how easy this is to find these days, but if you can get your hands on this, the Career years, this has from their self-titled debut right through 1984's Crusader. We also have a lot of bonus tracks. We also have the live album, The Eagles, landed on here as well. So Wheels of Steel's my number 6. Number 5. Now, I showed a vinyl in the thumbprint for the video. Here's the CD. I originally had a jewel case CD, but lent it out, never got it back. The Pretenders' self-titled debut. Like, to me, I don't think the Pretenders ever touched this because after 2 albums, James Honeyman Scott died, Pete Farnan died a year later, but this is an excellent album. Best known for the song Brass in Pocket, which was a top 20 hit single here in the United States. There's also a cover of Stop Your Sobbin' by the Kinks on here, but this whole album kicks ass. And it's quite versatile too, because The Phone Call is near punk. Precious is excellent. Tattooed Love Boys is awesome. Space Invader is a wicked instrumental that was later featured on an episode of Sopranos. Private Life is very mellow and reflective. Kid, another song in that same vein. Mystery Achievement, what an excellent propulsive closer. Another excellent album, top to bottom. The Pretenders' self-titled debut is my number 5. Number 4, I love Rush, and I think everything from 76 through 85 was great. And you can argue this is their best album. I'd still go Moving Pictures, maybe Grace Under Pressure, but Permanent Waves is fantastic too. And this was the album that would really break the band in the United States. This is when we really started to hear Rush on the radio. You started hearing Spirit of Radio a lot. You started hearing Free Will a lot. And you still hear them a lot on your album-oriented rock stations or your classic rock stations here in the States. But Jacob's Ladder is a wonderful near progressive track that really builds. Entre Nous is very melodic. Different Strings is mellow, but it's really cool. Natural Science, I think, is one of the best closers of an album, period. You could say this is definitely peak Rush right here because they kept those progressive elements while becoming more accessible. This is my number 4, Rush's Permanent Waves. Number 3. Okay, this is another album I've loved since the 1980s. I still have the cassette sitting in the archive somewhere. And I've talked about this band quite a bit. I've talked about them on Grant's Rock Warehouse. I've talked about them on Ryan's Final Destination. This is The Police, Zenyatta Mondatta. This album would give the band 2 top 10 hits in the Do 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 Da 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 and Don't Stand So Close to Me, the opening track, but this got played all over AOR too. They would play Driven to Tears and When the World is Running Down, You Make the Best of What's Still Around as a twofer. They would put those songs together and they sound fantastic together. Bombs Away, I think, is wonderful. This is when they really started to get topical. Voices inside my head. What a groove on that. Same thing with The Other Way of Stopping. Canary in the Coal Mines, kind of more of a ska song, actually. That's a cool track. Behind My Camel won a Grammy for Best Instrumental, I believe, that year. But this whole album, another one, kicks ass and takes names. Zenyatta Mondatta by The Police. Not my favorite Police album. That would be Regarded to Blank. But Zenyatta Mondatta is awesome too. That's my number 3. Number 2. A band I've talked about on Bicycle Legs channel. Wonderful band. Discovered this band about 20 years ago. My brother and I discovered this band at the same time. And it's The Jam with Sound Effects. Sound Effects would give us the song That's Entertainment, which was the only song by The Jam that would chart on the Hot 100 singles here. But they were huge in the UK for several years. They were putting out songs that weren't on the albums that were going straight to number 1, like Going Underground. The bass on here from Bruce Foxton, really up in a mix. You can really hear those bass lines like on Pretty Green and Scrape Away. Start sounds a little bit like Taxman, but it's a great song. Taxman by the Beatles. But I'm Different Now is pure power pop bliss. Set the House Ablaze is really raging. Man in the Corner Shop is a wonderful track. Boy About Town, very catchy, very poppy. Monday's more reflective and dreamy. Excellent album, top to bottom. The Jam have 3 excellent albums, in my opinion, that I'd give a 10 to, and this is the third of those 3. This is Sound Effects. That's my number 2. My number 1 is an album I discovered 15 years ago. Now, I knew the singles off it, but once I heard this in its entirety, I was in, and I never left. Talking Heads, Remain in Light is my number 1. This album is best known for the songs Once in a Lifetime, which was a single. It had a very creative video that we saw back in the early days of MTV. Cross-Eyed and Painless is a pretty popular song from the album as well. But this whole album is just excellent. Variety of moods. It starts out very kinetic. The first half of this album is very kinetic and very danceable. The Great Curve is my favorite song by the Talking Heads. It was my favorite song of 1980. If you watch on Grant's Rock Warehouse when we do our top 10 tracks from a particular year. Adrian Blue plays on this. Adrian Blue's very distinct guitar style is all over this song and a few others on here as well. Houses in Motion's fantastic. Seen and Not Seen, Listening Wind, The Overload, a very cerebral closer. This is one that works very well as a piece. Listen to it from beginning to end. Fantastic. I don't think that the Talking Heads ever touched this, although I do love Fear of Music quite a bit. I love Speaking in Tongues, more songs about buildings and food, but my number one is Remain in Light by the Talking Heads. My number one for 1980. Honorables. I'm sure some of you will like my honorables more than my top 10. Let me just go to my notepad here. I'll read them off. It'll be a little easier. There'll be even more glare in my glasses now, but here we go. Now, if we did this in the 1980s, Back in Black by AC/DC would certainly be there. It's just that I've heard that album so many times, I don't go back to it much anymore. The same way with Van Halen, Women and Children First. Again, wonderful album. Saxon, Strong Arm the Law is also there. But again, I think it's a little more consistent than Wheels of Steel, but I think that the highs are a little higher on Wheels of Steel and Strong Arm the Law, although I love this as well. Like a lot of these albums, I give a 10 out of 10. It's just, that's how much I love 1980. Billy Joel, Glass Houses was the first cassette I ever owned in 1981, along with Styx's Paradise Theater. My Nana bought that for me when I was 10 at the Woolworths, which was a 5 and dime. Bruce Springsteen's The River, that's a fantastic double album. It would have been in my top 2 or 3 up until a few years ago. I haven't been listening to Springsteen much lately, but again, fantastic album. We got Yes's Drama. That's a show that Johnny Metal or John Clauser and I did on his channel, My Music Corner. That's an excellent album. Judas Priest, British Steel, an album that I love except for United. Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. See AC/DC on that. That's another album I love, but I've just heard it so many times. Steely Dan's Gaucho. That album was very good. I think the 5 before it are great. Adam and the Ants, Kings of the Wild Frontier. Selector, there's another album. Another band that my brother introduced me to. Too Much Pressure, that was their debut album. Diamond Head, Lightning to the Nations. That's a very influential band for the thrash movement, very influential on Metallica. Squeeze's Argy Bargy. The Damned's The Black Album. That's a band I've really been getting into heavy the last few years. Psychedelic Furs self-titled debut. And Peter Gabriel's third album, the third self-titled album. A lot of people call it Melts. I got a used copy of that last year, and now I understand why so many people love it. It is a fantastic album. So, what are your favorite albums from 1980? Do you like some of my selections? Do you like my honorables more? I'm thinking some of you may like the honorables more. That's all good. Just to give you some programming notes here, I will be putting this out at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on November 3rd. While you're watching the debut, I normally don't go on the premieres. I usually only go on a live chat when I'm on Grant's Rock Warehouse. So speaking of Grant's Rock Warehouse, tomorrow night, November 4, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, join the incomparable Grant Arthur along with John Clauser, DC Toontime, BM Bolts, Ernesto Ramos, Todd Evans, Yvonne the Music Man, and myself as we talk about our top 10 favorite songs from 1985. On My Music Corner, we continue the Accept Up to the Limit series. I will be filming that with John Clauser and our special guest, Reed Little from The Contrarians. This episode will focus on Accept's 10th album from 1994, Death Row. Also, Thin Lizzy Thursday continues here on the Music Nut program. This week, this Thursday, I will discuss Thin Lizzy's breakthrough in the United States. Their only album to certify in the United States. Their only album to have the big hits in the United States, but the UK, they have a ton of hit singles. They should have had a ton of hit singles here in the United States. I'm talking about the album Jailbreak from 1976. I will have some upcoming appearances on Jake Knott from State Farm he's doing a Megadeth series on there right now. Believe next week I join him as we discuss Megadeth's fourth album, Rust in Peace. I know I have some stuff lined up on the Bicycle Legs channel as well as Curless Mania. So I hope that you join us for all those videos. Thank you so much for watching. Do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.